And wow, another wild character, I must say here, Minister Mason.
Subtle impersonation.
This actually, I was surprised to hear this was actually written for a man originally, right, in the script?
I think it still is, actually. I've never seen a script to this date that doesn't say a mild-mannered man in a suit. It was written for a mild-mannered man in a suit, and Bong Joon-ho and I were friends, and we were trying to find something to work on together, and he said, well, there's nothing in this one. And I said, okay, cool. I read it, and I saw there was nothing for me, but I was really keen to see the film, and then he wrote to me a few weeks later and said, what about the mild-mannered man? So, could you kind of imagine some kind of, so, it's like trying to make fire with two wet, sticks, and they kind of slowly dried out, and I started to have a very wicked fantasy.
So, how much rewriting and how were you involved in reshaping the character at all?
No rewriting at all.
Really?
No rewriting. As you can hear, Mason is referred to constantly as Sir, and he, and then sometimes people said she, I think. But you know what? What's a gender between friends? I think it's, who knows what Mason is. There's a talk about a prequel television series. They're beginning to discuss it, and so we're talking about what the life before the train is for all these people, and thinking of what Mason's life might be before the train is really interesting, because who knows? I mean, Mason could be anybody, because anybody could turn into that.
Yeah. It's fascinating themes in this film. It's really ultimately, I think, a movie about survival in many stripes, in terms of that word. I mean, what was it that attracted you to the ideas in this film, the themes of it?
Well, I mean, of course, originally it was Bong, and I would do anything with Bong. I think he's really a master. I've loved all the films I've seen, and I've now managed to even see his first film, which he wouldn't let us see, but we managed to kind of, rip it somehow. I can't remember how, but we managed to find his first film. I urge you, if you haven't seen his other work, to go and find all of it, because if you've seen The Host, you might have been more prepared for this, but Memories of Murder is phenomenal, and Mother, and then his first film, Barking Dogs Never Bite, which is really sick. In all the right ways, and it's about the legend of people eating dogs in Korea, so it's good fun. But I would have done anything with him, and I still would, because he's that original, and he manages to do this extraordinary thing with each film. He makes us. He makes a universe that's completely unique to itself. Even, I mean, The Host is, I won't go on talking about it if you haven't seen it, but that's a universe, and then this is a complete universe, and the next one for sure will be something else. And that's such a dream as a filmmaker, to work with filmmakers who do that, because you sort of step through the looking glass into this whole world. He does that. But so within that, yes, this idea of this train, this strange allegory of what would happen if we were all on this ark, and more than that, we were 17 years in. Because we can all imagine the scramble on day one, or 2 weeks in, but 17 years in, it's got really murky.
And it keeps running. I'm so impressed.
Running forever. And there are bits that you're never going to see. That I loved. I loved the idea of the revolution, moving up the train, and the tail section, getting to see a sushi bar, or going through a hairdresser's, or just that feeling of it's, for me, it's also feels so cinematic. It's almost as if every carriage is a different homage to a different filmmaker. So you sort of go through your Fellini section, you go through Delicatessen. I don't know. It's like it's going through cinema.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, the look. How did you work with, obviously the costume designer, the makeup people and everything, but I mean, it's an incredible look. Did you have specific ideas about how you wanted this character to appear, or how did it come about?
Yeah, I have to think quickly. I have to find a way of describing how it came about, because otherwise it's going to sound so random. And it probably was, but there was more to it than just randomness. So we started out with this gesture that we were going to do this strange morph into this mild-mannered man in a suit. And I started to think about dictators and how, what's the most sinister thing about dictators actually is the way in which, with a little bit of hindsight, or even at the time, we turn them into clowns and we end up finding them rather endearing and hilarious and funny things they say. And it's really not funny, you know, they're kind of amusing us, and so we go on voting them in, but they're... and maybe we're voting them in because it's a little bit soap opera and they're funny characters. I don't know, but it is a sinister thing. And I'm from a generation who, first year I got to vote, we all voted, and Margaret Thatcher got voted in, and the years rolled on, and it wasn't funny. It really wasn't funny. And then, you know, years go by and people start saying she was actually quite endearing. And, you know, and then of course we're in Charlie Chaplin's building, and Charlie Chaplin made The Great Dictator about Hitler. I just felt that there was something to be learned also from Kubrick and the games that he and Peter Sellers played with monstrous clowns. So thinking of monstrous clowns and thinking that might be a way of disrupting this mild-mannered man in a suit, which feels a little like a cliche, you know. I feel like in terms of apparatchiks, sort of second-degree villains, because he's not Wilford, he's like second in command, a really dangerous sort of person.
Yeah.
The person who says they were just following orders. It feels like there have been lots of mild-mannered men in suits, and it would be nice to throw a different shape. So between us, Bong and I started to think of clowns, and it so happens that the real grain at the heart of Mason is someone from my own life who I can't name for the sake of sensitivity in myself, but someone
George
in my
Clooney.
childhood. I didn't say that, you said that. Someone who was kind of that shape, who was a bit dictatorial and had made that sort of noise, and didn't actually look like that. But put it this way, when my brothers see this film, which they haven't yet, but they're going to laugh a lot. And we just started to sort of cook it up. And Bong Joon-ho and Catherine George, who's a great costume designer, came to visit me in Scotland, and we just started dressing up. It didn't take very long. I always wanted to play a character with its nose like that, because of what it does to the eyes, actually. It makes you go a little bit like that. And so we kind of got a piece of sellotape and put my nose up, and then we thought, oh, well then maybe I better have some teeth. So we thought, okay, brush it down, let's get some teeth. And what about some googly glasses? And we got some googly glasses, and what about a wig that kind of moves around, and some huge breasts in a huge bra. We just sort of, it was like, you know, Halloween, basically.
Yeah. People could go out, later this week dressed as ministries. It'd be a fun costume.
Yeah.
Did anybody?
Very cheap.
Yeah.
They're really easy to put together.
Any of the other actors jealous? They wanted to
Well, funny you should say that, but Jamie Bell, we have, when you shoot films, you always have a cast and crew photo. And in the cast and crew photo, which is a thing that lives forever, Jamie Bell is wearing Minister Mason's bra and breasts. He really loved those breasts, and whenever I wasn't working, he would wear them and sort of stroke himself.
Logistically, how was this film shot? Were you? It's just like such a big scale. It looks like here. But.
We were in a train. We were in a real train in a big studio in Prague. And the train was a series of, I'm trying to remember how many, I think there were about 10 carriages, and they moved on a gimbal. So all that movement, we didn't have to fake it, which was a great relief.
Wow.
And so it was very interesting to be on a shoot where the first thing that would be shouted out before roll cameras was gimbal. I know everybody was talking about So we got on a train.
Wow.
For all that time.
Yeah, that's like, it looked like very close quarters in some of it there.
Fascinating to see Bong and our cinematographer working out how to shoot it, because if you're going to be shooting an entire film in a carriage, you've got limited angles.
Yeah.
But that in itself was really interesting, because they work in Korea, apparently quite regularly. They work with the editor right there on the set, and they assemble a rough cut as you're shooting. So you will shoot you sitting on your chair there, and then they will shoot this gentleman here, and then they will assemble it, and they will say to me, okay, so in between these two shots, we're going to shoot your shot. So when Pete leans over and bangs you over the head with a microphone, then you're ready, and you go, oh, right, so maybe I'll go like that. And then you know that at the end of your shot, you're going to be doing something towards this gentleman over here. And so it's really fascinating. It's like putting together a jigsaw. And I've never worked in that way before, but apparently in Korea it's quite a regular occurrence.
Was this, you play such interesting roles all the time. You never know what's going to attract you, what you're going to turn up in next. It's always a surprise, always interesting. What do you look for as an actor now, that really makes you want to spend time on a set for a couple of months?
Well, I've always, I'm always aware, and slightly embarrassedly, that I don't look for roles particularly. I'm aware that we're in a room full of honoured actors, and I know that honoured actors tend to go for roles, and I'm embarrassed to say that I don't think I ever have. I've always gone for the conversation with the filmmaker, because that's how I started. I started working with one filmmaker, Derek Jarman, who I worked with for 9 years, over 7 films. And that was the first principle, and then the second principle was, what's the film going to be? And then the third principle was, what might I do in it? And sometimes there was nothing for me. Sometimes there wasn't even a mild-mannered man in a suit. And so going for the role is not something I've ever learned to do. I wouldn't quite know how to do that, because I don't think I would know. I don't know, maybe, who knows, I never say never, maybe at some point a role would come through the door that would be so, just such a companionship, that I wouldn't need the companionship with the filmmaker, but I doubt it, frankly. I think I feel, in terms of my own wiring, it's so important to be in league with my comrades that I wouldn't want to just sit in my trailer working out a role by myself. I really like to feel in a conversation with the filmmakers. So, in answer to your question, whatever comes along, what comes along is the conversation. So it'll either be a conversation with someone I know, or it'll be someone new, like Wong, who I didn't know before. And we'll just, whip up some idea that's interesting, and as you put it, makes me want to not only go and be on a set for a few months, but go around the world for several years afterwards talking about it, because that's the deal, especially when these films are small and or original, as they say. So they need a bit of, midwifery.
Based on a comic book or something like that.
Well, this is based on a comic book.
Yeah,
actually,
but it hasn't been superhero 12 times,
So, when you haven't got the budget to have massive billboards, it's really, and it's so my pleasure to go around talking to people about a film like this, because, I should be so lucky to know the filmmaker.
Yeah, and this one got out in an interesting kind of distribution pattern, at least here in America, where they put it out for a couple of weeks and then went VOD and did incredible business. Really, they were so happy. I mean, the box office on this in all forms was great.
Yeah, I think it's slightly broken the mold, which is, we were a little nervous about it. Filmmakers were a little nervous about it, because honestly, we would rather people go to see a film like this on as big a screen as they can.
Yeah.
But you know what? We just want people to see the film. And the good news was that people saw the film that you just saw, and they didn't see a film that was cut by 20 minutes. And there was a moment when there was a discussion, quite a hot discussion, about English-speaking audiences only seeing a 20-minute shorter version. And thank the Lord, that was resisted finally, and so it meant that we weren't on big billboards, and it meant that probably people will have to get to know it, you know, over a longer period of time. But we're very patient. It doesn't really matter.
It's a discovery movie to be sure, and it did really well internationally too.
It was the biggest, like historically biggest film in Korea when it first came out, and it's been incredibly well received all around the world. Huge in France and Germany and Italy, and it hasn't actually opened in the UK yet, but I think it's opening.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, you guys have some questions?
It deviated a lot. I mean, in terms of its basic look, very much so. Although the artist, the artist in the film, the drawings that he makes were actually made by the graphic designer of those novels. So it has a kind of interior kind of, you know, integrity, if you like. But and the idea of being on this arc, this moving arc, was absolutely the thing that stayed the same. But it changed very much. I mean, if you don't know the work of Bong Joon-ho, you'll recognise the aesthetic of this film is very much his aesthetic. It's a sort of, yeah, it's not, the graphic novel is French, and there's a kind of, well, I don't want to be reductive and say that there's a Korean aesthetic to this film, because that's ridiculous. There's a Bong Joon-ho aesthetic to this film, which he absolutely brought. But the basic premise is the same, and his attachment to the graphic novel was so great. He tells the story that he was in a graphic novel store in Paris, and he picked up the book, and he just stood and read the whole thing standing in the shop, and then went, I'm going to make a film of this, and that was about 10 years ago, I think.
Wow. Performance. You touched upon themes of the film, and one thing that...
Well, we like it. It has to be really tough if you have to put around those.
Striking differences, just as Mason didn't really exist in the comic.
Good question, actually. I would say, well, it's always so different, isn't it? I mean, the thing about a comic strip, of course, is that you haven't got that down the barrel of the train feeling, because you're somehow flipping within the points of view. It was more psychological. There's something about the gesture of going down the train or up the train in the film that's so visual. The graphic novel is less visual, basically, and it's a book of ideas, definitely, and it's about a kind of predicament. But it's more aesthetic. The world is more aestheticized, and it's people talk more to each other, and they don't hack each other up as much with axes in this film, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He is so amazing in this film. I'm so awe-inspired by his performance, and I think there's something so thrilling about. I always love people, you know, bringing their full kind of, you know, shape to bear. And I remember when Bong told me that Captain America was going to play this part. I just thought that was so genius. I mean, genius of Bong to think of it, but genius of Chris to do it, because he brings Captain America into this train. It's a really clever move. And yeah, I just love it. I really do. I wish he was here to talk to you more.
Okay, got time for like one. Oh, okay, right here in the front. Yes, there you are.
Thank you so much for being here. It seems like
It was a really, really good fun. A lot of laughing went on. And it was a lovely cast because, yeah, it was one of those very nice casts which comes and goes, you know, people would be coming in. We were always bemoaning the fact that because of the compartmentalizing, and funny enough, it's the same with Grand Budapest Hotel. Everybody was going, oh, you're here for these days, I'm leaving then, and oh, you come back, you know, all this. And the same was true of Snowpiercer, you know, because of all the sections. People, oh, you're dead by then, and then I'm going back. We were never all in some big, you know, thing together at the end, which we would have liked. We all got killed off slowly. But no, it was a really delightful and very everyone was so thrilled to be working with director Bong because it was so clear. I mean, everybody who was working with him, certainly those of us who weren't Korean and hadn't been in his filmmaking before, we knew how lucky we were to be invited in, and it's a very relatively exotic world, as I explained, with the way in which she shoots and the way in which she cuts, and the atmosphere was really quite buzzy. Everyone was aware that we were making something very special, and we were all in Prague, so it was like, that's a great question because it forces me to try and work out what I do. I think I do, in short. I think it's true. I mean, in a nutshell, what I try and do, having made a decision to play with it, I try and find something that kind of guy ropes me to something that I know really well, so that I can be as relaxed as I possibly can be. Because if it's something I don't really know about, and I remain in a position of not really knowing it, then I'm so worried about being tentative or being too shy to sort of really live in it. And so, I don't know if this makes any sense, but anyway, I'm going to keep talking in case it does. So, I just try and find, even if it's one tiny element, it doesn't have to be some mega, oh, I knew somebody like this, or I was like this myself, or any of that, although it would help, by the way, if it was really close, because then you could really relax and not work at all. It just needs to be one little anchor that makes me feel I really know it, and so I can then play and not follow the dots and get brittle or tight or unsure, because that's the devil. Because you can see that when people are doing that, you can see them sort of trying to, put the wool over your eyes in the audience, I think. So it does help if it's something physical, because then you can always root yourself in it. But when I say physical, it could, for example, be the voice. I mean, this person I referred to in my murky past, in my family, not actually in my family, but anyway, some of my brothers know. The voice was the key for me with this character. And the second I sort of hit on that, and it helped that there was a very nice cross-reference with the fact that, as mentioned before, Margaret Thatcher, had she not had any elocution lessons, would have sounded like that, because she comes from Yorkshire, or came from Yorkshire. So there was this really nice little double whammy in my own mind that it would fit to make Mason have this voice. That then freed me up. I thought, okay, that's my work, I'm done. Now I can play. Now I can put on a silly wig and feel relaxed. So whatever it is, it just needs to make me feel relaxed. And if it's something physical. And I've heard and read actors talking about really practical methodology, like getting the shoes. And I understand that. I mean, it's not necessarily a methodology for me, but I understand what that's like. Maybe if it's not a voice or a wig, it might be a pair of shoes that would just get you there into that position of just being able to rest so that you can then play. Thank you for all of that. I know that, as I mentioned with Captain America playing Curtis Everett, everybody bringing all of their ness to the table was a part of every decision Bong made in casting them. And Ed, who was cast relatively late, was when Bong thought of Ed Harrison, and I was around at the time when he was having this idea. It felt so perfect for every reason. I mean, he does have that very clear-sightedness, Bong, where he will make a decision. For example, he made this decision that Wilfred was going to be a small man, a short man, and that's, when an artist has that kind of conviction, it's kind of tricky, because then you go, well, hang on, is that really what's important, and as the weeks go by, he goes, yeah, it really is. It's really it's not just a graphic issue. It's to do with a kind of it's just what it means. And so then trying to think of someone who was not tall but had the kind of power. When Ed Harris, loomed into vision, then of course, the deal was done. It had to be Ed Harris, but I would say more than the Truman Show, also the right stuff. I mean, he is that conductor. He is that almost, how does one assess Ed Harris? He's got that, he's Wilford. He can be Wilford at least. I believe him as Wilford. And though it's a tough call to imagine what Wilford might have been, but he really felt that he could have come up with this thing and gone with it. And yeah, it was Ed in a dressing gown, in a silk dressing gown. What could be more perfect? But to what you were saying about Bong and his humour, for example, I do urge you all to go and find his films and harass Criterion, as I have tried to put out Memories of Murder, because when you see these films, you'll see that his performers are always able to be relaxed and live and funny, always. And the great Song Kang-ho, who plays in the film, and Ah Sung, who is always in his films, is consistently genius and really funny all the time. And that's Bong. He will always try and make it possible for a performer to just keep flipping on a coin between being sinister, between being kind of crazy, and being in some way touching and funny. And he always used to say about Mason, whenever I'd done something particularly sort of bombastic, he would say, "Oh, Mason's so cute."
Love it, gotta love Tilda Swinton.